The title reads English Premier League clubs in crisis, and I cannot disagree at this moment in time, and neither can the Telegraph, because they've already printed an article that says 5 ways for English football to improve in Europe, and I'm going to go through the list and share my perspective. So number 1, they want to say to introduce a mid-season break, which I am for. Luis Suarez wrote about this in his autobiography. He said it left him exhausted when he had to play during that break. When teams like in Spain and Germany, they get that little bit of a break to gain a breather, whereas teams like Chelsea had to play 5 games and then go and play PSG after the break. Does it influence a lot? I don't know. I think it does. I think it doesn't. But it can also work in your favour, because if you're going in that continuing mentality and winning every game, there's no stopping you. You're a steamroller. You're going to keep continuing to beat teams. But in Europe, I think that it does hinder you, because you're not playing against an opponent that you play week in, week out. Playing English football 5 games in a row, you start to get that same mentality. Everyone's going through the same regime as you. So if you're on a winning run, then you're playing against opponents who are at the same disadvantage as you. But then going into Europe, I can see the argument, because teams like PSG don't play as much, and coming out against Chelsea, they maybe look a bit sharper. They don't have as many injuries, and it's something that Jose Mourinho has advocated for years, that the Premier League's fixture list is too strenuous on their players. So that could be one that I have to say I would agree with. I think that Premier League teams need to loosen up. The Premier League officials, have to loosen up in their schedule and rethink whether they want their teams to continue to perform in the Champions League and give them that needed break. But you look back at maybe 5 years ago, when Premier League teams were dominating the Champions League and getting into the latter stages in the Manchester United, Chelsea final era. Was it a problem then? No, it's only because they're losing now that they want to bring it up. It's losing that they're looking for an excuse, which this is an excuse, maybe a valid one, but it's not the main one in my reason, which I will get to at the end. The next one is combine wealth and intelligent spending, and I think that comes down to coaches. And then in the top of the article, it says that maybe there's coaches across seas that are better. Who's better than Louis van Gaal? Who's better than Jose Mourinho? Apparently. These are fantastic coaches. Yes, you don't have the talent of Pep Guardiola and the young coaches of Diego Simeone and Luis Enrique, but you still get well-experienced coaches, and they should know better. I think Chelsea spent very well, but they just don't have the same quality as these teams that they're playing against. Barcelona, I continue to reference them, were said to be in crisis last season. Crisis. It was laughable. What part of them was in crisis? Because they did not clean up and their trophy cabinet was not overflowing this year. They said Xavi's past it. What did they do? They bring in a player like Rakitic, who's not the same quality as Xavi at the moment, but they will build him. They will mature him. In England, if someone's not performing, they don't mature him. They sell them off. Fernando Torres was just a disaster at Chelsea, and yes, he had to leave, but he was under so much criticism from the get-go, because you expect immediate performances from some of these players in England, whereas you get someone like Rakitic, who has a goal today, who I don't think has been fantastic in the La Liga, but I have no doubt that he will grow into be a great player like Xavi, because they have the depth to mature him into that role. They have the depth to bring in players like Matthew, who's not a well-known defender, but he will mature into that position to the point that they don't look out of place. Look at the players that are still in Barcelona during this crisis period last year. Dani Alves was criticised, still playing pretty well. Piqué was criticised, playing well. Jordi Alba, Mascherano. They didn't need to change much. Yes, they bring in someone like Suarez, but they mature what they've got. They help to build an already strong team. And this goes into the next point. One of them was flexibility of fixtures, which we kind of talked about. I'll touch on that in a minute. But it's recovering identities. They mentioned Manchester United and Chelsea of years ago when they had that strong identity. Players age. Of course you're going to have to change. Ryan Giggs can't play forever. But the idea is to bring in someone along with Giggs and mature him and slowly bring him into the team. But when you bring in someone like Angel Di Maria at the moment for all that money, there's so much pressure on him. And yes, he should be performing, but there's no backup. There's no plan B, because you've not got the homegrown talent that's going to continue to perform at the best of that team's ability and form into the same team structure that you're forming, because you're changing your coach so quickly as well, with David Moyes going out and Louis van Gaal coming in as Manchester United as an example. They don't know their own game plan. The game against Tottenham was the first time that I've seen Manchester United look like an actual team with that same mentality throughout. Whereas at some points during the season, they look like two opposite teams. Whereas Barcelona, win, lose or draw, I'll continue to reference them, they play the same game. They rarely change what they want to do to their opponents. Sometimes they'll go away from home and they'll maybe be a little bit more defensive, but they still stick to what works. Not saying everyone has to play tiki-taka, because it does not work. But when you look at Inter Milan, when they won the Champions League, what was their game plan? It was a defensive structure built by that man Jose Mourinho, and counter-attack teams, and used their attacking ability of the likes of Diego Milito, and they didn't change it. no matter who they played. They went to Barcelona, they packed their defence, it worked. I think that teams in England are trying to change their game when they go to places like Barcelona when it's not possible, when they play against teams like Real Madrid when it's not possible. You have to stick to what works, and that is true. Recover your identity as a team. Take the Europa League seriously, and I have to agree with this because Celtic made the UEFA Cup final many years ago and everyone took it a lot more seriously than what it is, and I think that's down to the Europa League and their new movement. I don't think they should have brung in the group stage. I don't think they should have went away with the knockout round because that's what made it so unique. That's what made it different from the Champions League, and that's what made people want to win it, because it was a knockout stage, 1v1 over 2 legs, consistent through the rounds, not group stages. And I think there was one stage when they added 2 group stages, which was ridiculous. So I think that they need to go back to taking that competition seriously, but I would like the Europa League to go back to the way it was. So I know there's a lot of points there thrown at you guys. You're probably minds exploding. You're probably already typing so fast, disagreeing with me, but the facts are there. English Premier League teams are no longer a threat against the likes of Barcelona, Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, even Monaco. Who do you think would perform that well in the Premier League? I don't know. They've got a good defensive structure. Defenses win championships, but also outstanding talent wins games like Barcelona. So it's a hard balance. But what I have to say is that there's not as much homegrown talent in England, I don't think, anymore than what. And this is a problem with the national team. They're not anywhere near as good as the likes of the teams around them because they don't have the same homegrown talent. And it goes back to what we're doing and the amount of money that's in the game. When teams like Manchester City would rather go out and spend millions and billions on players like Mangala, who you don't even know, who's come in and he's on the bench against the big name teams, and you get guys like Di Maria who's brought in for all that money and he's sitting on the bench, is because they don't trust their homegrown talent and they're not being matured enough to perform at that level. So that is an underlying issue that I think a lot of people have to bring up. I think there's a lot of different opinions on this, and I want to know yours. I just think that at the moment you can talk about changing the fixture level, you can talk about reducing the amount of games that they play, you can talk about getting back to that identity. It's quality. The quality specifically in Barcelona and Bayern Munich for me is far superior than any team in the world, and mainly in England. They don't have the same attacking threat, they don't have the same game plan. Bayern Munich stick to their game plan. Did they panic after a 0-0 draw at Shakhtar? No. They understood that the way that they approach the games under the coaching mentality of Pep Guardiola, that they would win the game. I honestly didn't think that Chelsea had a plan B when things started to go against the way that they usually play. Whereas teams like Barcelona, they don't panic. They just know that they trust their own game plan. They trust the way they play football, and I think that's the main issue. Homegrown talent, lack of quality. We want to know what you guys think. Leave your comments in the section below. Why is the Premier League suffering in Europe? We want to know what you guys think. Subscribe to TYT Sports.